Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Eric Lanask. I'm with TMC, and it is my pleasure to kick off today's live webinar. Hopefully, you are all seeing the title slide today and see the title, Using Enterprise Labor Networks to Drive High-Quality, Flexible Contact Centers. You all know customer experience. It's the big buzzword today, and for very good reason. Customer loyalty, we've all read about it. Uh, is really at an all-time low, and at the same time their thirst for service excellence is only growing. It makes quite a dilemma for customer service teams and contact center leaders. The good news is there are plenty of tools out there to help contact centers deliver great experiences, but that's only one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is the staffing, the hiring, the training, the scheduling that enables contact centers and leaders to match their needs. On the one hand, you don't want to have too few agents and create really long wait times for your customers. We all know that's going to put your agents behind the eight ball from the start. On the other hand, you don't want to have an overabundance of agents creating excessive downtime. If call volumes were consistent, it'd be a whole lot easier, but that's hardly the case. And it's a challenge that's plagued customer service teams forever, really, and created this constant puzzle that contact center managers have to face. How do you match your available staffing with customer demand in a way that ensures that you can keep customers satisfied while keeping an eye on your budgeting and making sure you're getting maximum return on your customer service spend? And it's a situation that really has been exacerbated by current staffing conditions. Certainly we've got those annual, the seasonal peak volume periods, like we see during the holidays. But the reality is these kinds of fluctuations can happen all the time, at any time, for any number of reasons. It could happen on a weekly or a monthly basis, or these can be event-driven situations that pop up every now and again. Those can be a lot harder to manage from a staffing perspective, especially when you consider the fairly rigid labor model that businesses have always used. So what do they need? How can they do it? They need something a lot more flexible, something that's much more in line with the current economy. We've all seen how the gig economy has really become popularized. They need something that enables their contact centers to flex up and down at will, even on a daily basis if needed. And especially today with remote work having truly become mainstream, it shouldn't be a pipe dream. Companies should have access to talent to help them effectively manage their customer service needs as they change. Let's face it, everything in our world today is being delivered as a service. So why not labor? I'm not kidding. And Sahil Mehta, who is Vice President of Sales at Shiftsmart, is here joining me today to explain why and what that really is about. Why there's a new model for contact centers that's going to enable them to embrace a new highly scalable labor model and leverage a new workforce that's ready to work as long as they can work when they want to. It gives business an opportunity to add an unprecedented level of flexibility and scalability to their customer service workforces and allows them to meet these evolving needs whenever they arise. Now, before I hand over today's session to Sahil, just a couple of quick programming reminders. As always, we have a Q&A session built into the end of our time today, and I encourage you all to use the interface on your screens to submit questions to us at any time. We also have a couple of poll questions throughout today's presentation, and on behalf of Sahil and the team at Shiftsmart, thank you very much in advance for taking just a few moments to participate in those questions. Because you guys always ask, there is, if you're interested in today's slide deck, the presentation deck is available in the handouts section of your interface. And last but not least, if you have additional questions after today's event or are interested in accessing the on-demand version of today's webinar, you'll get all of that detail in a follow-up email following today's event. So with that, once again, welcome. We're glad you're here with us today. And now please welcome Sahil Mehta from Shiftsmart.
Thanks so much for the introduction, Eric, and thanks so much to everyone who's joining. We're really excited to talk about this very hot topic at the moment. As Eric said, my name is Sahil Mehta. I'm VP of Sales at Shiftsmart, and I've been working with large-scale enterprises and government agencies and professional services firms with Shiftsmart for almost 5 years here. And before I jump into some of the content, we'll tell you a little story about kind of where the genesis of Shiftsmart came from and how we got to this point today. So a few of us on the early team were actually living in San Francisco back about 6, 7 years ago, right around the advent of the on-demand or gig economy. So you had several companies like Uber, Lyft, Postmates, and DoorDash, many of whom that were launching their services in San Francisco. And of course, as young tech employees, we were at first excited by the fact that we could more conveniently order a car or order food to be delivered to us. But what we found as also being total nerds, more absolutely compelling was the other side of the platform, i.e., for the first time, you had hourly workers who were able to go out and say, hey, I'd like to start working now and I'd like to stop working now, and here's where I want to do my work. And that flexibility, that freedom, empowered by the smartphone and delivered through these on-demand companies, created a lot of opportunity for people to take control of their own schedules. And what you saw was somewhat counterintuitive, because ultimately what people found was that, hey, it wasn't always the best or most ideal economic arrangement for these individual drivers. However, the numbers still flourished and several of them still participated. And we think the reason for that is because we believe they valued the flexibility. So the average Uber driver was driving something like 10 hours a week. Similarly, on Shiftsmart, we're seeing workers work between 15 and 20 hours on average per week. And our takeaway from observing that on-demand economy rise was that as these companies normalize some of these new perks to hourly workers, whether it's, hey, choose when you work, get paid instantly, have a performance-based ratings on every shift, those were going to become baseline expectations that these workers took to other jobs, regardless of if they were in the gig economy or not. And you've seen that across several different industries, and companies have had to react. So what we wanted to build was a first of its kind platform, building a modern labor platform built for the modern worker. And what we mean by that is we've built an end-to-end technology platform, a network of over 500,000 workers in over 50 countries that can tap in and work with large-scale enterprise and government agencies with the expectations they have of, hey, I want to work when I want to work and I want to get paid fast. And for the employers, making no sacrifice to quality based on a standard enterprise level training and performance management program. And we set out on that path 5 or 6 years ago. But as we take a look at why we did that and what's happening today in the labor market, want to talk a little bit about what we're seeing in the economy, because as you drive around your local communities, you're probably finding that, hey, every single store and retailer and restaurant has a now hiring sign. Companies are making huge moves to try and hire thousands and thousands of workers. And, this is borne out in the data. We currently have the record high number of job openings and record low labor participation. So just 62% of folks participating in labor. And COVID was a accelerant of several existing trends, and it just added fuel to that fire. So what you had at a baseline was this unprecedented job availability, even before COVID, where people were able to switch from one job to the next without much concern of being able to find the next role. And even if they had some concern about time between jobs, the rise of the gig economy made it possible for them to cover that gap by picking up hours on things like Uber, Postmates, DoorDash, and other providers. From an event-driven perspective, of course, the impact of COVID starts with the stimulus and unemployment checks, which have had some impact on reducing labor force participation. But we think some of the bigger challenges that we're facing are things like childcare responsibilities. Several people's schools are still not open on a regular schedule, and as a result, these responsibilities have forced several Americans to opt out of a traditional 9-to-5 or a traditional FTE model. Similarly, COVID-19 fears are still latent and present in a lot of the workforce. So from that perspective, we saw COVID both accelerate existing structural factors as well as introduce new event-driven factors, which we've covered off on here. And what we're seeing is a set of behaviors on both sides. Both employers and workers are making a change in their behavior. So on the worker side of the house, we're seeing this, what we're calling the flight to flexibility. Our thesis, or what we observed firsthand in consumer logistics on-demand startups like Uber has now flooded into several other parts of the economy, which has led to about 35% of the U.S. workforce participating in the gig economy in some format. More and more people are looking for independent work opportunities to be their own boss, set their own hours, and work when they want to. And we know that several of these workers are avoiding full-time work due to personal preference alone. And for the first time, we actually have a record high percentage participation by women in the gig economy. And of those surveyed, 80% said that flexibility was the most important reason for them to take on that work. So what we're hearing loud and clear from the workforce is that we want flexibility, and I'm willing to trade off on a long-term relationship with my employer in order to drive flexibility in my day-to-day life to manage between my family, my personal obligations, my health, as well as my work as one of those items. However, employer efforts haven't really matched that demand from the workforce, because what you're seeing is things like, okay, we're going to pay higher wages, we're going to offer interview bonuses or retention bonuses, or once we've hired you, we'll move you into more full-time roles, we'll give you more part-time benefits, or even subsidized childcare in the case of CVS Health. And what you're viewing is that each of these responses, while appreciated and potentially moving the needle a little bit, are only addressing the symptoms and the root cause, and not the root cause, because none of them are addressing that core demand for flexibility. And we've talked to several employers over the last 18 months, and what we hear more and more is a growing openness to this idea. So 5-6 years ago, when we spoke about this concept, there were several employers that either rolled their eyes or were too hesitant or conservative to pursue this. But now several people are embracing this model of, hey, let's offer flexibility and dispatch shifts to a larger workforce and use it, an Uberized model is what they often call it. But what we call that is enterprise labor networks, and we'll talk about that in a moment. So when you talk to companies and you say, why are you unable to do this? Why are you unable to go into a flexible workforce? Several reasons cited, everything from internal hesitations to technology to operations. But before we move on to the next section of the presentation, I want to pause here for a quick poll. So I'll turn it back over to Eric for a poll.
Excellent, thank you. So for our first poll question, Sahil just talked about kind of some of the challenges in terms of staffing. And we'd love to hear from you. Have you faced increased difficulty in attracting, hiring, and retaining agents to adequately staff your contact center, and specifically in 2021? Yes, it's much harder than before. Yes, it's slightly harder than before. No, it is not harder than before. Or no, it's actually easier than before. Sahil, when you talked about some of the challenges just a moment ago, are those technology-driven challenges, or are those challenges driven by what you really talked about is people just wanting to work in a different way, looking for different kind of hours, shorter shifts, things like that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think you're seeing challenges. If you think about the value chain of bringing people in and managing an hourly workforce. Now, I'll show a slide about this in a moment here, but it basically breaks down into three components. You've got to find people, you've got to manage people, and then when your baseline schedule falls apart, you've got to deploy last-minute fixes and make changes on the fly. And what we're finding is that at each stage, there's different challenges. Of course, attracting people in the first place is really hard to stand out in a noisy market where there's limited interest in entry-level jobs. Several employers, such as Amazon, have increased the stakes of wages and the like. And you're just seeing a lot of people say, hey, I'm not willing to take this job for this pay rate, or, hey, I want to work on my own schedule. You're seeing several different reasons. So just at its core, we're seeing definitely in the instance where individual just worker interest is a big driver. But then, I think the technology is a real challenge here because and I'll show this poll and I'll show this visual in a moment. If you think about those three components of the workforce management stack that I talked through: find workers, manage workers, and deploy last minute, there's several vendors that will attack one part of that problem, but very few vendors that will look across the entire value chain and become quote unquote full stack in terms of, hey, your goal is to fill the shift with someone that's high quality that will work and do the work that needs to be done. And whether it's a job board, a scheduling app, or a last minute staffing firm, none of those individual players are incented or aligned with your incentives to drive that fill over time. So I think you have this vendor technology misalignment, but then also just this very challenging trend in the market in general where individuals' interest and what they're willing to work for and how they're willing to work has also dramatically changed.
Got it. Makes a whole lot of sense. So if you take a look, I don't think you're going to be surprised that overwhelmingly our audience believes that not only is it hiring harder than before, but it is actually much harder than before.
Absolutely. So I'm not surprised to see that result. I'm happy to see that at least some people think that it's not as hard as before, or it's just the same, which, I'm happy to hear that some part of the economy is facing that. But I think what we're seeing is that, for a vast majority of employers, it's much harder to find people, and it's just as hard to keep them. Amazing. Eric, should I jump right back into the presentation?
Yes, it's all yours.
All right. So thanks all for voting in the poll and participating. Let's get back into the presentation. So I'll actually jump right in where I had been talking about to Eric's question earlier. So if you think about those three components of the human capital management stack, so finding workers, managing workers, deploying workers last minute, in each of the individual types of technologies and tools and vendors that are available, none of these individual vendors, and they may be great or best in breed in their category, is solving the entire problem across the value chain. And that deep incentive misalignment creates coordination costs and is really designed to solve for a very specific need for someone within the employer. No one's really solved for the individual worker. Think about the worker's experience of, I apply on Indeed, I then get invited to another system where I have to submit information. Then when I get hired, I'm added to yet another system to take training. Then I'm added to yet another system to get my schedule. May have to badge in or clock in a different system. I may have worked, gone across 8 different systems before I even start working. And if I'm someone that, I don't view this as potentially a long-term relationship, I'm just looking for short-term opportunities, the cost to get started just seems way too high than before. So, looks like I am not sharing anymore. All right, I think I'm back. The coordination cost is just too high. And we see this not only in the tooling, but also in the training. We have several customers who they have 8 to 10 weeks of training for someone that's doing a job that, probably could be effectively trained 80% of the role in 2 to 3 days. And that training has, again, been designed to solve the problem of the trainers, which is, hey, I need to create really long PDFs and lots of compliance-based documents, and not to solve the needs of the worker, which is, hey, show me how to do the job effectively and show me how to be successful. And our viewpoint here is that, and that's where Shiftsmart comes in, and our viewpoint is that if we take a more flexible model to how we train and onboard and bring it into a single platform, we'll both enable that flexibility for the individual worker and be more likely to attract and retain them, but also be able to deliver high quality outcomes to individual employers. So a little bit about Shiftsmart, over 500,000 workers on the platform in over 50 countries, and we work across several different verticals. So what we do is we offer what we call enterprise labor networks, and it's designed to be, if you have a company or an agency in the government, or professional services firm, whatever you may have, our labor pools are not designed to be staffing or BPOs, but to be enterprise labor networks, which are flexible, scalable extensions of your existing workforce or the workforce you would build. And we've seen this deployed successfully across retail customers, hospitality, logistics, healthcare, localized staffing, and as well as what we're about to talk about more today, the contact center. And what I'll say is, our model makes us ideal for large-scale customers. So we work with some really big brands, some of the most recognizable brands in the world, everything from Facebook and Google and McDonald's to professional services firms like KPMG and Deloitte, to some of the largest government agencies like the Small Business Administration and the New York City government. So we've got a lot of experience working with large-scale employers on really, really fast projects that need to be scaled up quickly and effectively. And our viewpoint is that, if you take everything I've said so far around, hey, the existing model of how employers are trying to attract and retain workers and their technology stack is just not going to serve the worker well. We think the future is about worker centricity, flexibility, and democratizing access to work. So an end to the Flintstonian era of labor management, as you see, Fred clocking in here. And that's where the Shiftsmart marketplace comes in. So the way we like to describe ourselves is a little bit like the Amazon of labor. And what do I mean by that? We're nowhere nearly as big as Amazon yet, but if you think about Amazon, they had a single bet, which was that, hey, commerce will be transacted on the web. And if that's the case, then you need to in order to take advantage of that trend, you need a end-to-end technology platform plus the fulfillment tools, i.e., the website, as well as all the fulfillment centers and delivery infrastructure. You need a network of customers, i.e. profiles for those customers of their preferences, their payment information, the ability to support them. And then combined, that technology end-to-end platform, the fulfillment tools and the individual customer profiles could be combined to enter in markets vertically. So initially they started with books, then they moved into CDs, then toys, and now you can buy everything from, we like to say, from bleach to a truck, all can be purchased all on Amazon. Very similarly, as they are trying to build the everything store, we're building the every shift store. So we've built an end-to-end labor management technology platform, the set of fulfillment tools that enable us not just to find and identify the right worker for a shift, but make sure that they show up, are able to do the work effectively, can be trained and performance managed the way that our customers would do it themselves. And we combine that with a worker network of over 500,000 worker profiles, where we can keep track of things like, hey, what is this person's performance history like? What is their ratings? What are their stats? What are their availability? Previous work history, certifications they hold, and that combines to create the Shiftsmart marketplace or the every shift store. And what we enable for large-scale employers, whether it's with their own existing workforce or within a workforce they're tapping into from the Shiftsmart Enterprise Labor Network, is some of the best pieces of the flexible economy without having to sacrifice quality. So what we mean is flexible worker pools. So, if you're thinking that you need 100 concurrent agents working, we would be able to recruit several hundred and offer fractionalized shifts so that we can identify the top performers and offer them more hours per week. Instant payments, workers love being able to work a shift, finish, and see that payment hit their debit card within 30 minutes. And then finally, demand-driven scheduling. And this, to me, I think is the most important thing for the contact center use case, which is effectively that, hey, if people are calling in on an unpredictable basis or even a seasonal basis, how will you be able to ramp up enough people to serve your customers without having to hold that as fixed costs all year round? You want to be able to manage your peaks and troughs effectively. And what we like to compare this to is, if you think about cloud computing, the origin, companies used to buy servers on premise, and you would forward forecast where your peaks and troughs would be, and then you'd buy enough and hope that you didn't ever go over your peak, and you hope that, hey, I stay close to it so I don't have utilization issues and just spend a lot of money that I don't need. We think that the on-premise server is like the FTE of the past, where the FTE is now being fractionalized, where, hey, at a certain moment I may need hundreds of people, but on others I may only need 50 or 25 agents to work the queue. And if we know that independent workers and contact center agents prefer this flexible setup, why not match those two needs with each other in order to drive more work when work is needed and less when less is needed, to drive better cost effectiveness to the customer. All of this is empowered and ultimately possible because of the worker profile data. So this has everything from the roles that they're available for, their certifications that have been managed that we make sure aren't expired, performance management aggregated across several employers, payments information, work history, badges they've earned, as well as their existing schedule. So, really powerful, makes it really powerful for us to be able to start with new customers. I'll give you an example. We recently onboarded a customer where they needed to perform customer satisfaction surveys, and across an omni-channel approach, they'd been hitting an under 2% contact rate of their customers. What we found was that When they came to us for help, we were able to target a list of workers that had historically done this type of work, performed well at it, and who we knew were available to work this shift in the hours that we thought were the highest likelihood of people answering their phone and performing the CSAT survey. We almost 10x their conversion rates from that 2 or under 2% to nearly 20% of people answering, and that was done in just under 250 hours of work. So what you're seeing is just our ability to quickly identify, hey, who is the right person, and deploy them accordingly. All of this on the other side of the house, if you think of that end-to-end platform, is made capable by our Shiftsmart labor management platform. And this integrates across the labor management stack. So everything from screening to sourcing to scheduling, time and attendance, performance management, communications, reporting, and of course, payments, which is a huge part of that. And for the worker, it's a super simple experience. They may see an ad on one of their favorite social networks or get referred through a friend. Once they sign up, they'll receive a phone call, get brought into a training class, as well as be screened for their background. Once they've attended role-specific training, they can actually become eligible to do that role. So I think this is the most important part. We're not just making it available to anyone and everyone. People have to have the right background, the right screening assessment, and then to complete the right training assessment successfully before they're eligible to pick up a shift. Once they're picked up to shift, they're able to go and complete that role. And of course, there's a vast variety of shift types on the platform. And then after that, they're able to receive payment. So we have several customers where individuals can hear about us in the morning and be paid by the end of the day. Let's stop here for the second poll question. Eric, I'll pass it over to you.
You got it. So you guys have now heard a little bit about what Shiftsmart does, and we're kind of wondering, when you're thinking about taking on a partner to help with the hiring and management of agents for your contact centers, what's typically been your top concern? Is it quality, cost, speed, scalability, or flexibility? Would love to hear your thoughts on this. And in the meantime, Sahil, I think if I would go for all of the above. If I'm a contact center manager.
Yeah, no, it's a great call out. So I mean, think about it this way, right? Historically, and not just in the contact center, but for several other types of workforces that individual companies had to manage, you basically had three options. And the first option was you build the workforce yourself. And here you're perhaps solving for quality and maybe even speed, because you're able to handle it all internally. But you know that it's going to be expensive, both in terms of money and the time of your top people. You know that it won't be really able to scale because your ability to bring on several hundreds of people will be limited by your ability to bring on recruiters. And then, of course, flexibility goes with that ability to scale. So, hey, if you need to ramp people down, are you going to lay people off? You have offices and fixed investments against this. So it is pretty challenging from that perspective. The other option was, hey, let's go to a BPO. And the BPO just says, cool, you need 100 people. How about I just go hire and manage those 100 people for you? So perhaps there's some cost arbitrage opportunity, but they can match roughly the quality concerns that you may have for your own workforce. But again, they don't really give you the speed. I've heard of it. I spoke to a recent customer who said it took them nearly 8 months to get started on a relatively small contact center. While we've been putting up 1,000-person contact centers in under 3 days. And then finally, that ability to scale and flexibility is very low. You may be locked into contracted minimums, have no real ability to move up or down on any fast basis based on your customer demand. So if you're not building it yourself or you're not going with a BPO, you could even go with a temporary staffing route. And here, maybe you get the flexibility. You can go from 100 people one day, 10 the next day. But you know that, one, you're going to pay for cost because that's where they drive margins from. And two, you're probably going to pay for it in the quality of the experience. So all of that to say, across those options, you've typically had to make a trade-off as an organization. And that's why we put this question out here, because we think that there's actually an opportunity to stop making that type of trade-off.
Got it. Makes a lot of sense. Let's take a look and see what our audience is telling us. And it's interesting. Cost. I'm a little bit surprised to see that cost is not the top concern for anybody. Not surprised at quality. I would have expected quality to be at the top, and then flexibility coming in as the other chosen option. Does that
Yeah.
surprise you at all?
No, it's really interesting, right? Because these two things are fundamentally trade-offs of one another, or at least they're perceived as such by individuals. That hey, if I want something flexibly, then I've got to sacrifice the quality, or if I want something quality, I'm going to have to invest. But I'll give you an example that some people might be familiar with from their summer vacations. But let's talk about Airbnb for a second. Because when we talk about Shiftsmart, one of the things we say is, hey, technology is enabling the fractionalization of fixed assets to their unit of consumption, i.e., we don't have to buy the entire thing in order to tap into that thing at the quality level that we would get if we bought the entire thing. In the case of Airbnb, I think the really interesting example there is, hey, you can go out and get a really great vacation house or just part of a vacation house, and you don't have to pay all of the costs related to purchasing that home, maintaining it, because you're able to just tap into it on a fractional basis.
Sahil,
Hey, I just want to. Hey there.
it looks like your screen might be frozen.
I see. Let's check it out for a moment. Apologies. Let me. How about now?
There we go. Now we're
Cool.
seeing the poll. There you go.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks for flagging that for me. But just to quickly wrap up that comparison, effectively, you don't have to trade off on quality with Airbnb because you can get a really great vacation home, but you also don't have to trade on flexibility, i.e., you don't have to buy the home to have access to it. So that same type of concept is what we're trying to build to the idea of an FTE where, hey, I want the quality of someone who's worked for me for several years, but I don't want to have the commitment to that, several years of work because I don't know when I'm going to need it. So for us, we've often viewed those as diametrically opposed, in large scale corporations in the past. We're bringing in new opportunity to do things a bit differently. And Eric, if you're ready, I'm happy to jump into the next part of the presentation.
Absolutely, all yours.
Awesome. So let's talk a little bit about how we balance quality, cost, and speed. So I think it's super important. So, this is what we talk about, what we call our Flex Contact Center solution, which is a technology and labor solution enabling businesses and government agencies to basically build large-scale enterprise labor networks that can flex up and down to meet call volumes, expand on a seasonal basis, or fully outsource. If you say, hey, look, I don't want to handle this at all, I want you guys to manage to this outcome from a quality and performance perspective. Here are the keys. You guys go find the right people. You guys find the right technology. We can do all of those components, and that can be done on the inbound tier 1 or tier 2 support process, on the outbound process, as well as just the labor management software. So we have customers who say, I already have the workforce for this, but I want to be able to manage them more flexibly. Can you help me with that? And that can work across channels. So we know several companies are moving to a more omni-channel approach to the world with their contact centers. We can work across all of those. And here's the whole reason of why it works. So actually, I'll talk a little bit about a few key examples. Just working from left to right, we had 40% cost savings for Topgolf inbound support, where we were able to provide phone-based surge customer support and cut those wait times in half. For the SBA, we were able to launch and scale to almost 10,000 hours per day to provide basic FAQs on the EIDL and PPP program. And then, with Dynata, we scaled to several thousand hours a day, where we've performed higher than in-house agents in terms of performance on an outbound basis. But I want to talk a little bit about how this works. So let's just quickly talk through kind of what is the next generation of the cloud contact center look like, and how does that flexibility and surge support contrast with the traditional outbound contact center? So a traditional BPO, whoever it is you work with, you have your existing team support capability, and basically they say, okay, great, we're going to sign a 12-month contract, and you want 100 agents per day working 9 to 5, and instead of working on your facilities, they're going to work in our facilities. And there's a few challenges to this model. First off, it's a fixed capacity staffing model. So you have dedicated full-time agents. And what that means is that if there's a period of time where you're not getting calls, you're not actually getting utilization out of those agents. And I think what's worse is, we're not just, you can't cut your way to prosperity from a cost perspective. That's bad. But what about the customer experience side of the house? So if you're a business that, say, gets 2x calls in the evening versus the morning, and you have the same level of people working, or the same number of agents working, your inability to flex up means you have this bimodal distribution where, hey, parts of the day you have tons of people that are just sitting around, and parts of the day you have wait times, abandon rates, and all the things that come with not having sufficient staffing. And that fixed model is just limited in that way. And that's similar to the challenges folks have when they run these centers internally. Next thing is, you have limited access to new talent. If you go out and hire 100 people, on the first day, 20 may not show up. 20 who show up out of the 80 who show up, maybe 20 are not high performers. So managers and supervisors are taking them to the break room to give them a talking about how to be more empathetic on the phone. All of that's a very slow process, and you can't very quickly assess who's going to be good, who's not going to perform, and how you can go identify high performers and prioritize those. And then finally, it's just the same rigid cost structure and high prices as in-house call centers. BPOs don't really innovate on technology. They're basically, they earn their margin on just collecting, surplus on the person's wages. So that is their model. That's how they expand. And for them, they just need to create that overhead model for themselves in order for them to unlock the revenue margin and expand their business. Now, in contrast, when we go to the Shiftsmart model, it's slightly different. So, we'll start here. We'll take a look. With the Shiftsmart model, what we do in contrast is, so let's say, your company starts working with us today. The first thing we do is we deploy an account team made of seasoned, contact center operations professionals who will basically say, let's go understand the nature of the calls and come up with our own Shiftsmart proprietary training. And this training material would be run through by, take your training material as an input, redeveloped and designed for the modern contact center agent. Once we've built that training materials out, run some train the trainer sessions, we would deploy out our rapid recruitment engine. And that engine would enable us to tap into tens of thousands of existing agents who have done roles similar to the type of role and the characteristics needed, i.e. inbound contact centers are very different from outbound contact centers. So we would be able to calibrate for that accordingly. And from there, once those people have been invited into the labor pool, they would go through a screening assessment as well as training that includes role plays, assessments, and everything. And that would get to our pool. And on day one, if you're saying, hey, I may max out at 100 agents, we'll actually deploy about 300 to 400 agents into the pool, knowing that they are all people who appreciate flexible access to work. They don't want to always be on call or always have to be available. And if that's the case, what we can start doing is offering fractionalized shifts. So why not offer a 2, a 4, a 6-hour shift instead of the standard 8x3 to give yourself 24-hour coverage? And once we've done that, as people go into the shift, so the first benefit of Shiftsmart is the flexibility and surge support because, hey, we've trained 300 people for the 100 agents you need. So in a pinch, if we need to go up to 150, that model is completely supportable to us, and we can do that in minutes. Next is we can access best-in-class agents. And what I mean by that is, everyone will say, hey, our agents are best in class. We'll have the data to show, hey, here are the agents who are the right fit for your role, and we can go pick them based on their performance with other customers, which means you're getting the benefit of the performance management that's been done over several customer use cases. And of course, we can continue to train those folks. We can continue to train and identify who the best performers are once we've started work with you. So typically it takes us 4 to 8 hours to understand someone's performance within a new project. And once we do that, we can say to that person, hey, we want to offer you a slightly higher bonus because we want you working more often because you're really good at this role. And over time, there's this evolution where we can just consistently deliver the best group of people. And then finally, from a cost perspective, just based on the fact that we use a consumption-based model, i.e. you don't have to pay when you're not using it, we can reduce costs that way. And our agents are onshore and will provide the same quality levels as what you'd get from a traditional BPO, or perhaps even better in some cases. So very excited about, kind of the offer we have here and the offering we've brought to the market and deployed at several enterprise and large-scale government agencies. I've been really, really lucky to share this story with you all. Look forward to getting some questions and just sharing any more information you have. Last slide here, our motto, get shift done. But if there's any questions, feel free to reach out to me. My email address is sahil@shiftsmart.com.
Sahil, thank you. Some awesome information there. some really cool things that that Shiftsmart is doing. So I appreciate you sharing that. Hopefully, our audience found it helpful as well. We do have some time for a few questions now. So again, back to our attendees. If you have questions, now is the time to submit those to us, and we'll get to those, as many of those as we can. Um, let me go back. You talked a little bit just a slide or two ago about your whole training process. How specific does your training get with regard to different clients that you work with?
Yeah. Just by nature of the size and scale of some of the customers we work with, our training materials can be fully bespoke and customized to your technology platform, your scripts and use cases, as well as your culture and kind of the way you like to address and handle your customers. So our training materials are highly configurable and customizable to make sure that we're getting people into your ethos before they start working for your company.
Got it. So does that lend itself to scenarios where you've got sort of repeat engagements with the same workers working for a particular client?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what we'll often do is, think about it less as like a revolving door where someone's coming in working 2 hours for one person, 2 hours for another person. What people will do is they'll basically kind of latch onto one project for several weeks at a time, perhaps two at a time. So that then those people can work across multiple. But again, if we have, if we have a project with an organization and then the need goes away and then they suddenly need more people, we can easily tap right back into those people and re-invite them to a new training. So the training is always designed to be fresh. So if you haven't worked in several weeks or a month and you haven't done your training in a couple of months, we'll make sure that folks are basically refreshed in a new training before they're rebadged to work for your customer.
Got it. So how quickly does it take, if I suddenly have, if I have a need for 50 or 100 or however many agents, how quickly can I get those agents into shifts where I need them?
Yeah. So, at our fastest, which was with some, government agency clients in an emergency related to vaccines and the PPP program for the SBA, we were able to stand up pools of hundreds of workers in about 48 hours. And that included creating the training material, setting up the technology platform, inviting all of the agents to training, getting them all set up on their individual accounts on the IVR and on the CRM system, and then getting them scheduled and into shifts and then paid by day 3. So that's really fast. Typically, we'll say, hey, give us about 10 to 14 days to start a project. Typically, the long pole in the tent is getting access into any existing systems. We find that typically takes a lot longer than anything we need to do on our side. But, in other words, we are fast.
And then once you've got that initial setup and that initial training done, then it seems like it's a much faster process for future engagements, the next day or the next week or the next month or whatever timeline we're talking about for that same client.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, what we have found is, once you have a baseline built with a customer, it's very easy to scale. So several of our customers have started with just small engagements. Hey, give me 5% of call volume, 10% of call volume, 15% of call volume, and we've seen that increase to 75, 85, 95% of volume over time. And by having that baseline built, once you get off the starting line, it becomes very easy from there.
Are there specific types of calls? Are there typical types of calls that your agents handle when it comes to professional services or healthcare providers, or does it really come down to whatever each individual client needs?
Yeah, so we like to instead of kind of putting it in from an industry perspective, we'll usually identify requirements and characteristics based on the role type. So there's different tiers in terms of the complexity level as well as the type of role. So there are inbound contact center agents as well as outbound contact center agents. There are outbound email agents, omni-channel agents, live chat agents. So you can basically map it to a role and then a complexity level and then build out the training and assessments from there.
Got it. Thank you. Can you talk a little bit about the pricing model? I don't want to get too deep into that, but have a couple folks asking what that's like.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So from a pricing model perspective, our model is super simple. We have two components to our model. First is what we call the platform fee, which is a monthly fee that covers the technology platform, the labor pool development, and professional services related. Think of this as your Costco card. It's your membership. It gets you inside and enables you to buy at those bulk prices, which is where the second component comes in, which is the hourly rate of the agents and supervisors, which is a consumption-based model. So you only pay for what you use.
Got it. And so in its entirety, then, how does that compare to using a BPO or using a staffing agency?
Yeah, I think right off the bat, if you work on this internally or versus even a BPO, we often find ourselves, 20 to 40% cheaper, just based on the fact of the way the model is set up. And then, the savings you get from being able to, that doesn't quantify necessarily the total cost of employership. So everything it takes to run a workforce or all the missed opportunities by not having the right workforce, we've done those types of calculations in the past and found, savings of, call it 30 to 45% in aggregate for the customer, as well as unlocked revenue.
Excellent. Thank you. Can you talk a little bit about how things changed for Shiftsmart and in terms of interest and client base throughout the pandemic, and more importantly, what you expect in terms of going forward, in a post-pandemic world?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, the pandemic accelerated several existing trends. So first, you had, this, in the contact center, especially, all of a sudden, people who for years had been uncomfortable with agents working from home just had to get comfortable given the nature of the pandemic. So you saw much greater acceptance of at-home agents. And as you can imagine, the technology investments have followed in terms of really great platforms and systems to do performance management, to actually manage the calls and whatnot. So that was the first kind of big change in the contact center space. But more broadly, you saw this total reset in the labor economy where so many workers were, furloughed or let go. And as a result, a lot of workers shifted their industry and roles and have moved around. And what we're seeing, as I shared earlier, is a massive flight to the, flexible economy. And there are folks that perhaps they were in a role for several years prior to that. They'd never thought of doing something different. And then all of a sudden, the pandemic, wipes out the way they were working. They, move to something else that's more flexible and say, hey, I'm not going back. I prefer this way of working. And you know what? I think that's not exclusive to the blue collar hourly workforce. I think several white collar professionals have realized, hey, I like working from my home. I don't want to have to go to the office 5 days a week. It doesn't make sense. And I like to have some freedom and flexibility. And all of that in aggregate comes together to a viewpoint where we say, hey, look, that freedom and flexibility is something that people will inherently always want and tap into. And several of those people will be willing to say, hey, I'm willing to work less hours or have less hours guaranteed to me if I get to choose when I do those hours.
Absolutely. Here's a good question. What steps do you take to ensure privacy of customer information when you're using this kind of a like you called it, an Uber style workforce?
Yeah, for sure. It's a really important thing. So first off, the technology is a huge part of this, right? So the way that, and we can plug into your existing technology. So it's the equivalent of what you might use for your agents who work for you directly. The second thing is that part of that training and pool creation process is security and privacy training and all of the various acknowledgments, background checks, just everything to make sure we're putting forward our best foot in terms of the right agent. So ultimately, the enterprise labor network process is one of mimicking the way that you would and mirroring the way that you would build a workforce so that you feel the same level of confidence that you do with your internal workforce.
What about technology requirements for your network of workers? Are there requirements for them? Is it based on individual clients? Are there things that can be provided or that they have to go out and acquire? How does that all work?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So what we ensure is that our agents have the right hardware, software, and environment to do the work. So what we mean by that is, of course, from a hardware perspective, ensuring that they have both an at-home personal computer, whether it's a laptop or a desktop, as well as a headset or whatever gear is needed to complete the job. From a software perspective, we have a whole tech setup process, which is part of the training process to make sure that you have, if it's a VPN, if it's an remote desktop environment, you have those softwares downloaded, and then you also have the dialers, the IVRs, the CCAS, the UCAS, the CRMs, whatever it is that person needs, they have that information and that software. But then also, it's more than just software and hardware. We want to make sure that the environment is right. So what does that mean? One, do they have a high-speed internet connection? Do we feel like they have a reliable internet connection? So call quality is really high. We test that using our internal team. And then secondly, hey, is their environment free of noise? I know that when folks call in, they may expect you to be in a contact center, and if you're not in a contact center and there's a dog running around or there's television on, that could be distracting and detract from the customer experience. So those are all parts of the checks that we do both upfront and as well as on an ongoing basis.
Excellent. Well, that all makes sense. How does the payment work between your clients and your network?
Yeah, it's a great question. So all of the workers have either a 1099 or W-2 relationship with Shiftsmart, and then we contract directly with the end employer. So they pay Shiftsmart, and then we pay our agents.
So they get paid directly. How quickly does it take to get that payment to them?
Typically in 24 hours or less. Most of our folks get paid from their shift. It all just depends on the verification process of the work.
So that's really a benefit for that workforce, is not only do they get to pick up shifts as in a way that works for them, but they also get paid extremely quickly.
Definitely. I think one of the things you see is that it's a different way of thinking, right? So if you speak to one of the interesting things, there was actually a study done by a labor economist of New York City taxi drivers who said, hey, a lot of these taxi drivers don't go out with an aspirational hourly rate. They go out with an aspirational total earnings that they want to hit. So even if they're making, $100 an hour after a point, once they've hit the level they want to earn, they'll stop working. And we see that to be true among several Shiftsmart agents as well, where, hey, these folks are saying, hey, I'd like to, earn $80 today for something I'd like to do. So I'm going to work until I earn 80 hours. How do I go do that? And that next day payments can be really, really important to help pay for essentials, help pay for luxuries, whatever it is. But making that payment available makes the job and showing up to the shift all that more attractive.
How many countries are you operating in?
We have done shifts in 57 countries.
Wow, that's impressive. Now, do you have clients that pick up workers from in different countries or in different regions?
Yeah, so we have several customers that leverage us to operate in several different markets, whether it's across the country or across the world. However, from a contact center perspective, 80% of those agents are onshore, and we have several customers who tap into us to just do 100% onshore agent pools.
Got it. Are there, I don't want to stray too far away from the whole contact center topic that we've spent this hour talking about, but are there other industries that Shiftsmart is expanding into or has expanded into?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll talk about a few key areas where we're expanding and where folks can tap into us. One is what we call fractionalized local staffing, which can be used in retail, for example, like convenience stores, supermarkets, where if you just need, partial shifts to be fulfilled by a local pool of folks to do relatively simple work, we can deploy that on a national scale. We can also do this in warehouse and light industrial context. So, across the supply chain, whether it's how the products come in or how they come out to the customer, we can be involved in that. Additionally, outside of the contact center, another use case is audits and inspections. And that can be everything from simple data collection, inspections, audits, mystery shops, up to really, really advanced property audits and inspections to make sure that a physical facility is up to snuff. So, the use cases are often, hey, I need a lot of people and I just don't know how long I'm going to need them for, or I need them very fast. Or it may be, hey, I don't need a lot of people in a single place, but I need a few people in a lot of places and we can help with that. Or, hey, I need a lot of people just to come in once to one place. So we do a lot of one-time offers of gigs and shifts too. So a lot of different range on the platform. As you heard me say before, we are building the every shift store. And for us, we're just always looking for new opportunities to drive shift volume to the platform, which helps us retain and attract the most high quality individual workers, which helps us, inspire trust with the employers, which ultimately drives more shifts on the platform. So for us, it's just, a big, a virtuous cycle that we're trying to build and execute.
Excellent, very exciting. And do you find, based on your experience, that your workers tend to like to pick up shifts from repeat customers, if you will, or repeat employers, if you will, or do they like to sort of expand their horizons and do work for a range of different employers?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. What we find is that probably about a third of people stay within a single employer. A third of people go within multiple employers, but they stay within the same vertical. And a third of people go to multiple employers and multiple verticals. So, hey, I'm going to do contact center work and audits. So that's roughly how it splits out. You really just do have different people doing different things. Some people say, hey, I would love just something that I get to train once and I can do this whenever I want. Others say, hey, I want variety. I want to try different things. And you see a whole range of different options on the platform.
Excellent. Thank you, Sahil. I think that takes us to the end of the time that we have for the Q&A today. I know there are a couple of questions still coming in, and I know that the team at Shiftsmart will be more than happy to respond to those offline following today's event. And again, if you have any additional questions or you'd like more information, Sahil's contact information is still on the screen in front of you. You'll also be getting a follow-up email with contact information and details on accessing the on-demand version of today's event. I also know that it looks like there's a couple of folks who may have had some difficulty downloading the slide deck from the handouts section. We'll make sure you get that offline following the event as well, and apologize for any challenges you may have had with that. So with that, again, we're out of time. I do want to thank everybody in our audience for spending time with us today, and a huge thank you to Sahil Mehta for sharing his experiences and explaining a little bit about what Shiftsmart is doing and why. Some great stuff going on. Hopefully it was helpful. Again, thanks to everybody for being here, and have a fantastic afternoon.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.